Princess Lyrael Voss stood on the wide balcony of the Crystal Spire and looked down at the broken city below. Illyria Prime had once shone like a jewel among the stars. Now its towers leaned like old bones, and smoke rose from streets that used to sing with light. The Vorath had come again. This time they brought hunger that ate whole systems. The insect fleet stripped planets to dust and left only silence behind. The Illyrian Concord was dying. The old empire that ruled half the galaxy with mind and will had shrunk to a handful of worlds. The divines who led them sat in their high chambers and argued in voices like distant thunder. They were beings of pure energy who had long ago left flesh behind. They called themselves gods, though no one dared say the word aloud anymore. Lyrael was the last of the Voss line. Her blood carried the oldest spark of ascension. Her mother had faded into light 50 cycles ago. Her father had burned out fighting the first Vorath wave. Now, the weight of a dying people pressed on her shoulders. The council had decided a marriage would bring help. The only ones willing to answer were the humans. Humans had entered the galaxy only 200 years earlier. They came from a single blue world called Earth, a place so harsh that its children learned to thrive on poison air and bitter water. They built ships from iron and fire. They fought with metal guns and numbers instead of mind blasts. The divines laughed at them, called them apes who played with sparks. Yet the apes had stopped 3 Vorath incursions already, each time with fewer ships and more dead left behind. The council chose Captain Elias Kane of the Sol Defense Armada. He was tall, with plain brown hair and eyes the color of old steel. His record showed steady service, no great victories, no shining medals, just quiet work done well. Lyrael had seen his image once, a still figure in a gray uniform standing on the bridge of a heavy cruiser called Indomitable. Thinking, he looked tired, like a man who carried too much and said too little. The wedding was held in the Great Hall of Unity. The walls glowed soft silver. The air smelled of ozone and dying flowers. Representatives from every remaining world came to watch. Lyrael wore the traditional white robe, threaded with threads of captured starlight. It felt heavy on her skin. Elias arrived in full dress uniform, black with silver trim at the collar. His boots made no sound on the polished floor. They stood before the high altar. The chief divine named Thalor floated above them, a column of pale blue fire that shaped itself into the form of an ancient Illyrian. His voice rolled through the hall like wind over stone. "This union binds our fates," he said. "May it bring strength to the weak and wisdom to the proud." Lyrael repeated the words, her voice steady. Elias spoke them too, his tone flat and calm. When the rite called for the neural bond, he raised one hand. The small silver band on his wrist stayed dark. The bond was meant to link minds, to share thoughts and feelings across the void. He refused it. Thalor pulsed brighter. "Why do you deny the gift, human?" Elias looked up without fear. "Human custom forbids it," he said. "We keep our minds our own." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some laughed, others stared in shock. Lyrael felt heat rise in her face. She had expected obedience, not defiance. Yet Elias met her eyes for one brief moment, and she saw no anger there, only quiet resolve. The rite ended with clasped hands and spoken vows. No kiss was required. The old traditions did not demand it. Lyrael felt relief. The touch of his skin was warm and rough, not the cool perfection of an Illyrian. She pulled away quickly and stepped back. Elias bowed once, then turned to leave the hall. After the ceremony, the guests drifted away to feast and whisper. Lyrael found him on a quiet terrace, overlooking the ruined gardens. He stood with hands behind his back, watching the smoke rise from the lower districts. She approached without speaking for a long moment. They simply stood together. "You refuse the bond," she said at last. "Yes," he answered. "Why?" "Because I do not trust gifts that come with chains." She frowned. The bond is sacred. It lets us share strength. It lets someone else inside my head, he said. I have seen what happens when minds mix too much. Yours would drown mine, or mine would break yours. Humans are not made for that. She stared at him. You think yourself so different. I know I am. He turned to face her fully. I have fought beside your people. I have watched them shatter Vorath carapace with thoughts alone. I'd have seen divines burn whole fleets with a single gesture. Yet when the battle ends, they tire, they fade, they need rest. I do not tire the same way. I do not fade the same way. Lyrael felt something cold move in her chest. You speak as if you are stronger. Not stronger, he said. Different enough that your gods fear what they cannot control. She laughed once. A short, sharp sound. The divines fear nothing. Then why did Thalor hesitate when I refused, he asked. Why did the council choose a plain captain instead of one of your shining heroes? They want a symbol, not a partner. They want my ships, my guns, my bodies to stand in front of theirs. They do not want my mind free. Lyrael opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no answer. The truth in his words stung like frost on bare skin. She looked away toward the broken skyline. The lights of human transports were already landing in the outer ports. Gray hulls, scarred from battles she had only read about. Come, she said at last. The council expects us to share quarters. It is tradition. Elias nodded once, and followed her. They walked through corridors of glowing crystal, past guards who bowed low to her, and stared at him. She felt their eyes like needles on her back. The chambers prepared for them were large and cold. Wide windows looked out on the black of space. A bed large enough for four stood in the center, covered in silk that shimmered like water. Elias stopped at the door. I will sleep on the couch, he said. She turned. This is our marriage. A paper marriage, he answered, for politics, not love. I will not pretend otherwise, and neither should you. Lyrael felt anger flare, then fade. She was tired, too tired to argue. She walked to the window and pressed her palm against the cool glass. Below her, the last defenders of Illyria Prime prepared for another night of waiting. Elias moved to the small desk and pulled out a data slate. He began to read reports in silence. The soft glow lit his face. She watched him for a while, noting the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders stayed square, even when no one looked. You are not what I expected, she said quietly. What did you expect? A brute, a loud man full of pride. He gave a small smile. I have pride, he said, but I keep it inside, where it cannot trip me. She studied him again. You really believe you can save us? No, he said. I believe we can save each other, if we stop pretending one side is God and the other is dirt. Lyrael felt something shift inside her, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. She did not know what it meant yet. She only knew the night felt less heavy with him in the room. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. The Vorath were coming again. Everyone knew it. Soon the galaxy would test this strange union of princess and captain, of ancient blood and new iron. And somewhere in the high chambers, Thalor and the other divines watched through unseen eyes, their light flickering with unease. They had invited a human into their sacred line. They had thought him small and safe. They were wrong. The first alarms would sound in 3 days. The real story would begin then. Years passed after the wedding, and the galaxy held its breath. The Vorath fleet still prowled the outer rims, but their attacks grew slower, more careful. Humans had brought their ships in steady waves, gray hulls with red stripes that marked the Sol Defense Armada. They built strong points around dying Illyrian worlds, turned asteroid fields into kill zones, and mined jump lanes with smart bombs that waited years for the right target. Lyrael lived most of the time aboard the Indomitable. The flagship was a brute of a vessel, wide corridors lit by harsh white light, metal walls that rang under boots. The air always smelled of oil and recycled breath. She had her own quarters near the command deck, a quiet space with one large window that showed stars sliding past at impossible speed. Elias stayed on the bridge, or in the lower decks, where the engines hummed like living things. At first she watched him from a distance. He rose before the ship lights brightened. He ran laps through the empty halls, sweat soaking his gray undershirt. He lifted weights in the gym until his muscles shook. Then he showered, ate plain food, and returned to duty. He never complained, never boasted. He spoke little to the Illyrian officers who served as liaisons. They treated him with cold politeness. He answered with short nods. One night, after a small skirmish, Lyrael found him in the repair bay. Sparks flew from his hands as he welded a cracked bulkhead. The damage came from a Vorath boarding pod that had punched through the armor. He wore no gloves. The heat should have blistered his skin, yet he worked steady and calm. She stepped closer. The smell of hot metal filled her nose. "You should let the drones handle that," she said. "Drones miss things," he answered without looking up. "Small cracks, big problems later." She watched his hands move with sure skill. The torch flame danced blue against the gray steel. When he finished, he ran a finger along the seam, checked for heat, then stood, wiped his face with a rag. "How do you not burn yourself?" she asked. "Humans feel pain the same," he said. "We just keep working through it." She frowned. "You make it sound easy. It is not easy." He met her eyes for the first time that night. It hurts every time, but stopping hurts more. Lyrael felt something stir inside her, a mix of respect and unease. She had grown up among beings who could reshape reality with thought alone. Yet here stood a man who fixed broken ships with fire and will alone. She turned away before he could see the confusion on her face. Days became weeks, then months. The war stayed quiet, but never stopped. Scouts brought reports of Vorath hive ships gathering in the black between stars. The divines called councils in their crystal halls. They spoke of grand strategies, of psionic walls that would shield whole sectors. Lyrael attended some of those meetings. She sat at the long table and listened to voices like distant storms. Elias never came. Reports, instead short, clear words on paper that the Illyrians found crude. One evening, she brought one of those reports to their shared quarters. Elias sat at the small desk, reading an old Illyrian text. The book was thick, bound in silver thread. He traced lines with one finger, as if feeling the words instead of seeing them. "You study our history," she said, surprised. "I study everything." He closed the book gently. "Your gods, your wars, your mistakes. I want to understand why your empire is falling." "It is not falling," she said sharply. "We are enduring." "Enduring is not winning." He stood and faced her. "Your people hide behind mind shields and energy barriers. The Vorath eat worlds faster than you can rebuild. Humans fight on the ground in the dark with blood and steel. We lose, we learn, we come back stronger." Lyrael crossed her arms. "You speak as if we are weak." "Not weak," he said, "blind. You think power comes only from the mind. You forget the body, the will to stand when everything else breaks." She stared at him, anger rising, then fading. She had no answer because part of her knew he was right. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. The Indomitable drifted near a repair station. Human welders swarmed over damaged cruisers, their suits bright against the black. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "Tell me why you never used the ascension amplifiers the divines offered you." "Because they come with strings," he answered. "They would change me, make me part Illyrian, part divine. I would lose what makes me human." "And what is that?" She turned to face him. "What makes you so different?" "Endurance," he said. "It's a simple word. We do not break easy. We do not quit. We carry pain like old friends because we know it passes, We know tomorrow comes. We fight for the people beside us, not for glory, not for eternity, just for one more day. Lyrael felt a chill. She remembered the stories of ancient wars. When Illyrians first ascended, they left pain behind. Left death behind, they became perfect. Yet in becoming perfect, they lost something she could not name. Weeks later, the Vorath tested the line again. A swarm broke through near the edge of Concord space. 3 hive ships, each the size of a moon. They spat pods like angry seeds. Human destroyers met them head-on. Railguns roared. Kinetic slugs punched through carapace armor at speeds that tore metal like paper. One hive ship died in fire. Another turned to flee. The third pushed forward, stubborn, hungry. Elias took a strike team to the crippled hive ship. Boarding action. The Illyrian liaison begged him to wait for psionic support. He refused. "We go now," he said. "Delay means they regroup." Lyrael watched from the bridge feeds. The team moved fast through zero-gravity corridors. Elias led them, rifle in hand. He moved like water around corners, never hesitating. Vorath warriors met them in tight passages, claws sharp as blades, acid blood ready to spray. The feed showed chaos, flashes of light screams cut short. Elias fought in the front. He took a claw strike across the chest. Armor split, blood welled, yet he did not fall. He grabbed the warrior, slammed it against the wall, fired point blank. The body burst open. Green ichor sprayed. Another came from behind. Elias spun, caught the claw in one hand, twisted, broke bone like dry wood. He drove his combat knife through the joint, severed the arm. The creature shrieked. He finished it with a shot to the head. The team pushed deeper, reached the central chamber. The overmind pulsed there, a living brain wrapped in flesh and crystal. It lashed out with psychic whips. Minds screamed across the link. Illyrian soldiers dropped, clutching helmets. Elias stood untouched. He walked forward, raised his rifle, fired once, twice. The brain case cracked. Fluid poured out. The overmind died in silence. When the team returned, Elias limped onto the hangar deck, chest wrapped in hasty bandages. Blood stained his uniform. Lyrael waited there. She saw the wound, deep enough to kill most beings. Yet he stood straight, met her eyes. "You are hurt," she said. "I will live," he answered. She stepped closer, touched the bandage. Her fingers came away red. "How do you keep going?" "Because I have to," he said. "Someone always has to." That night in their quarters, she helped him clean the wound. He sat without shirt, skin marked by old scars, new cuts. She worked in silence, her hands steady. He watched her face. "You do not have to do this," he said. "I want to," she answered. For the first time she meant it. When the wound was cleaned, she sat beside him on the couch. The ship hummed around them, quiet and steady. She looked at his face, tired but calm. "The crew talks," she said. "They say you are not normal. They say you should have died 10 times over." "Let them talk," he said. "Words do not change facts." "What are the facts?" she asked. "I am human," he said. "Nothing more, nothing less. We survive, we adapt, we endure. That is enough." Lyrael leaned back against the wall. She felt the ship move beneath her, a gentle push toward the next battle. She looked at Elias and saw not a husband, not a symbol, but a man who carried the weight without breaking. Outside, the stars watched, silent and cold. The Vorath gathered strength again. The divines whispered in their halls, uneasy now, because the quiet human had begun to show his teeth, and no one knew how deep those teeth went. The quiet years ended without warning. Scouts returned with faces pale as death. They spoke of the Eclipse Swarm, a tide of Vorath ships so vast it blocked the stars behind it. Billions of drones, warriors, queens, and hive minds gathered in the dark beyond Concord borders. This time they came to finish everything. The council chambers rang with fear. The divines who once spoke calmly now shouted over each other, their life forms flickering like dying flames. Lyriel stood in the great hall and listened. The air felt thick with panic. Maps glowed on the walls, showing red lines spreading inward. Every day another system fell silent. The Vorath no longer raided. They consumed. They left nothing behind, not even ruins, just empty space where worlds used to be. Thalor, the chief divine, rose above the table. His form stretched tall, blue fire shaped like wings. He spoke in a voice that shook the crystal walls. We will meet them at Illyria Prime itself. We will raise the greatest shield the galaxy has ever seen. Our minds united will burn their fleets to ash. The other divines pulsed in agreement, their light bright with desperate pride. Lyriel looked toward the human delegation. Elias stood at the back, arms folded, face calm as stone. He had said little during the meeting. Now he stepped forward. The room grew quiet. Even the divines turned their gaze on him. You plan to fight with minds alone, he said. Thalor pulsed brighter. What other way is there, human? Your crude weapons will shatter against their numbers. Elias met the divine gaze without flinching. Numbers matter less than will, he said. Your shields will hold for a time. Then the Vorath will find the weakness. They always do. They adapt faster than you think. A murmur rose among the Illyrian lords. One of them spoke sharp. You question the divines, Captain? Your place is to follow, not to judge. Elias ignored him. He looked at Lyriel for a moment, then back at Thalor. I question nothing. I state facts. Humans have fought the Vorath longer than most of you remember. We know their patterns. They strike hard. They test. They learn. They strike again. Harder. Let us form the rear guard. Let your gods fight in front. We will hold the line when the shield cracks. Thalor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You would stand behind us, ape. We need your ships, not your pride. Then use both, Elias said. Simple, we ask nothing more. The council argued long into the night. In the end they agreed. The divines would lead the defense. Humans would guard the flanks and cover retreat if needed. Lyriel felt relief, mixed with dread. She knew Elias would not stay back if the line broke. He never did. The fleet gathered above Illyria Prime, thousands of ships, human gray hulls, beside Illyrian crystal spires. The sky filled with light. As engines warmed, weapons charged. The Vorath arrived at dawn. Their swarm blotted out the sun, a black cloud that stretched from horizon to horizon. Hive ships, the size of small moons, spat. Pods like rain. The first wave hit the outer shield. Psionic fire answered. Brilliant white storms tore through the dark. Thousands of drones died in flashes. Yet more came. The divines descended. Then they left their citadels and took form in space, towering avatars of pure energy, each one larger than any ship. Thalor led them. His wings spread wide. He raised one hand, and a wave of mind force rolled outward. It shredded hive ships like paper armor, vaporized warriors, turned acid blood to harmless mist. The other divines joined him. Their light burned so bright that sensors failed across the fleet. For hours the gods held the line. The swarm broke against them again and again. Victory seemed close. Lyriel watched from the indomitable bridge, her hands tight on the rail. Elias stood beside her, silent, eyes fixed on the battlefeeds. Then the change came. A single Vorath ship pushed forward, different from the rest. Its hull glowed sickly green, a captured divine shard embedded in its core. Shard, pulsed with stolen power, corrupted, twisted. The Vorath had learned to feed on psionic energy itself. The shard fired. Once a beam of black light struck Thalor. The divine staggered. His form flickered. The beam drank his energy, pulled it inward. Thalor screamed, a sound that echoed through every mind in the fleet. His avatar collapsed inward, light fading to nothing. He vanished. Panic spread. The other divines turned their power on the new ship. Beams of white fire lashed out. The ship held the shard, absorbed the attacks, grew brighter, fed on the assault. One by one, the divines weakened, their forms shrank. Their voices grew thin with fear. Lirael felt the link tremble. The psionic web that bound Illyrian minds began to fray. Screams filled the air, mental cries of pain and loss. Elias grabbed her arm, pulled her away from the window. "Stay focused," he said. "We are not done yet." She looked at him. His face was calm, almost cold. "Dying. Because gods die the same as anyone else," he answered, "if they rely on borrowed power." Alarms blared across the bridge. The swarm pressed forward. Now the shield weakened. Gaps appeared. Human ships moved to plug them. Railguns roared. Missiles streaked in bright lines. Elias turned to the fleet commander. "Form the rearguard," he ordered. "All human vessels pull back to the jump points. Cover the evacuation. No heroics. Just hold." The commander nodded. Elias looked at Lirael. "Stay on the ship. This is not your fight anymore." She shook her head. "No, I will not hide while my people die." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Suit up. Then we go together." They moved fast through the corridors to the hangar bay. Human marines waited, already armored, rifles ready. Elias pulled on his own suit. The chest plate still showed the scar from the last boarding, scars he never bothered to polish away. Lirael donned an Illyrian combat suit, lighter than human gear, but strong enough. She took a rifle, felt its weight, unfamiliar yet steady. They boarded a dropship, small, fast, built for one purpose. Elias took the pilot seat. Hands moved over controls with practiced ease. The ship launched into the black, toward the heart of the swarm. The battle raged around them. Explosions lit the void like short-lived stars. Lirael sat beside him and watched his face lit by console glow. He flew calm, no fear, no rush, just focus. She realized then that he had waited for this moment, perhaps always known it would come. "Why now?" she asked. "Why did you hold back so long?" "Because the galaxy was not ready," he said quiet. "If I showed everything too soon, your gods would have feared me enough to kill me or chain me. Now they fear something worse." "What?" she asked. "Losing," he answered. "They fear losing to something they cannot control, something that does not need their light to shine." The dropship dove deeper into the swarm. Vorath drones swarmed around them, twisted the craft, dodged fire with impossible skill. The hangar doors opened. Marines poured out into zero gravity, rifles blazing. Lirael followed Elias last. He moved like a shadow through the chaos. Ahead, the flagship loomed, the one with the corrupted shard. Its hull crawled with warriors. Elias pointed toward a breach in the armor. "There," he said. "That is our way in." They fought to the breach. Claws met steel. Acid burned armor. Elias led the charge. He took hits that should have killed him. Kept moving. Kept killing. Lirael stayed close. Fired when she could. Her mind reached out. Tried to shield him the way Illyrians did. He shook his head. No. She heard his voice over comms. "Do not waste strength on me. I do not need it." They reached the central chamber. The shard pulsed there, huge, now fed on fallen gods' energy, swirled around it like a storm. The Overmind guarded it, a mountain of flesh and bone, eyes glowing with hunger. Elias stopped, looked at the thing, then at Lirael. "This part is mine." She wanted to argue, but something in his eyes stopped her. He walked forward alone, rifle lowered. The Overmind roared, lashed out with claws. Elias dodged, moved faster than she thought possible. He reached the shard, raised both hands, gripped the corrupted crystal. The shard screamed, a sound that tore at minds. Elias laughed once, low and hard. The sound cut through the noise like a blade. He pulled the shard free, muscles strained, veins stood out on his neck. The crystal cracked in his grip, then shattered into dust. A wave rolled outward, raw, unfiltered human endurance, pure stubborn life that refused to bend. The swarm faltered, the hive mind stuttered, drones froze, warriors dropped, the stolen power burned out channels. The Vorath had twisted. Elias stood in the center, breathing hard, hands bleeding from the shard's edges. He looked at Lirael and nodded once. It is done. Outside, the battle changed. The swarm retreated, confused, broken. The divines who still lived watched from their fading forms, their light dim, now mortal fear in their eyes, for the first time in eons. Lirael stepped to Elias' side, took his wounded hand. He squeezed back, gentle despite the blood. They stood together amid the wreckage, while the stars watched silent. The war was not over, but something had shifted. The gods had fallen, the human had stood, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The dropship hung in the black like a dead thing, engines silent after the hard burn. Elias stood at the open hatch and looked out at the flagship of the Eclipse swarm, its hull stretched wide, scarred and pulsing with green light. Warriors crawled across the surface like ants on a corpse. The breach they had targeted glowed red from plasma scoring. Lirael floated beside him, rifle gripped tight. Her suit lights cast sharp shadows on his face. He turned to the Marines behind him, 10 humans in heavy armor, faces hidden behind visors. No fear showed, only steady eyes. "We go in fast," he said. "Hit the chamber, take the shard, destroy it, then get out alive if we can." No one spoke. They nodded once. Rifles checked, magazines full. Elias pushed off first. He moved through zero gravity, smooth and sure, like he had done this 1,000 times. Lirael followed close. The other Marines spread out in a loose line. They crossed the gap fast, magboots clamping to the hull when they reached the breach. Elias cut the last of the emergency seals with his plasma torch. Sparks flew, silent in the vacuum. Inside, the corridor was dark, wet with ichor. Walls pulsed like living flesh. Vorath warriors waited, ambush ready, claws raised, acid glands swollen. Elias did not slow. He raised his rifle, fired 3 quick shots. The first warrior head exploded, green spray. The second lunged. He sidestepped, grabbed its arm, twisted, snapped the joint, then drove his boot into its thorax. Shell cracked open, soft parts spilled. Lirael fired beside him, her shots precise. Illyrian training showed clean kills, yet she watched Elias with growing awe. He fought without pause, without rage, just cold efficiency. When a claw raked his side, armor tore, blood welled. He grunted once, kept moving. The wound closed, slow but steady. Human flesh knit itself back together faster than it should. They pushed deeper. Alarms wailed in alien tongues. Red lights flashed. The air grew thick with the smell of burning chitin and ozone. Central chamber opened before them. Huge vaulted ceiling, lost in shadow. The corrupted shard hung in the center, suspended by fleshy cables. It glowed sickly brighter now, fed on the essence of fallen divines. Energy swirled around it in hungry spirals. The Overmind guarded the prize, a mountain of twisted flesh, eyes like burning coals, tentacles thick as tree trunks, lashed the air. Psychic pressure slammed into every mind. Lirael staggered, felt her thoughts scatter. The Marines dropped to their knees, helmets clutched, screaming inside their heads. Elias stood untouched. The pressure washed over him like water on stone. He laughed once, low and rough. The sound cut through the noise like a knife. The Overmind recoiled, as if struck. Elias walked forward, rifle slung over his shoulder, hands empty. "You think minds are everything?" he said, voice calm over open comms. "You stole power from gods, now you choke on it. Humans never needed your kind of strength. We carry our own, inside." Roared, lashed out with tentacles. Elias dodged the first, swung under the second, caught the third in both hands. Muscles bunched, veins stood out. He pulled hard, the tentacle tore free, green blood sprayed. He used the severed limb like a whip, cracked it against the Overmind face. Flesh split, bone showed. Lyrael watched frozen. The Marines struggled to their feet. One by one, shook off the mental assault. They rallied, fired into the mass of flesh. Rounds punched deep. Explosions bloomed inside the creature. Yet it healed fast, grew stronger from the stolen divine energy. Elias reached the shard. Now he gripped the crystal edges. Fingers bled where sharp facets cut deep. He pulled the thing free from its housing. Cables snapped. Sparks flew. The shard screamed a high, piercing note that vibrated through armor and bone. Lyrael covered her ears. Even through the helmet, the sound hurt. Elias held the shard high. Muscles strained. Neck cords stood out. He squeezed harder. Crystal cracked. Lines spread. Like lightning. Then the whole thing shattered in his hands. Fragments burst outward. Bright, then dark. Dust rained down. A wave rolled out from the broken shard. Not light, not fire, but something raw, something alive, pure, stubborn human endurance. The force hit the overmind like a hammer. Flesh boiled, sloughed off in sheets. The creature shrieked, shrank, collapsed inward. The psychic pressure vanished. The chamber grew still. Outside, the swarm faltered. Drones froze mid-flight. Warriors dropped weapons. Hive minds stuttered, lost connection. The billion-strong fleet drifted aimless. Confusion spread through their link like poison. The stolen power burned out channels the Vorath had forced open. Now those channels collapsed, taking minds with them. Elias stood in the center, breathing hard, hands dripping blood, shards stuck in his palms like glass. He looked at Lyrael and the Marines, then nodded once. "It is broken," he said. "Time to leave." They moved back through the corridors faster now. Flagship trembled around them. Bulkheads buckled, sections vented to space. Elias led the way, cleared paths with precise shots. When a last warrior lunged, he met it bare-handed, snapped its neck, dropped the body without a glance. They reached the breach. The dropship waited, engines hot. Elias helped Lyrael through first, then the others. He came last, sealing the hatch behind him. The ship pulled away fast. The flagship behind them began to break apart. Green light faded to black. Pieces drifted slow into the void. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the battle feeds showed the change. The swarm retreated. Ships turned, jumped away in ragged groups. Human vessels held position, covered the withdrawal. Illyrian survivors gathered what remained of their fleet. The divines who still lived floated in space, their forms dim, small, no longer towering gods, now fragile flickering lights. Lyrael removed her helmet. Hair stuck to her face with sweat. She looked at Elias. He sat on a bench, stripping damaged. Armor blood soaked his undershirt, yet he moved steady. No sign of pain. Medics came, rushed to him. He waved them off. Later he said others needed first. She sat beside him, took his hand, turned it over, saw the cuts already closing, skin knitting, pale scars forming where deep gashes had been. "How?" she whispered. "How do you do that?" He looked at her, simple. "We heal. We always have. Earth taught us that. Much death. We learned to keep going, or we died out long ago." She stared at the hand. Strong, rough, warm. Something shifted inside her. Fear, respect, wonder, all mixed together. She had married him for duty. Now she saw him clear for the first time. Not as a tool, not as a stranger, but as something unbreakable. The surviving divines gathered later in the great hall of the Indomitable. Their light, weak shadows of what it once was. Thalor was gone. Others stood in his place, diminished, mortal fear plain on their glowing faces. They approached Elias and Lyrael. Thalor's successor said, voice thin, "We offer equality, perhaps more. You have earned it." Elias stood quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. "No," he said, "I did not fight for your thrones. I fought for her, for the people who will come after. Human, Illyrian, whatever. No more borrowed power, no more chains." The divines pulsed dimmer. One spoke soft, "You could rule us all." "I do not want to rule," Elias answered. "I want to live free, same as everyone else." Lyrael felt pride swell in her chest. She stepped closer, took his arm, stood beside him. The divines looked at them both, then bowed low, something they had never done before. They turned and left, silent. Later on the observation deck, Lyrael and Elias stood together. The stars moved slow outside. Repair ships worked on damaged hulls. Human and Illyrian vessels side by side, for the first time. Crews mixed, talked, shared tools, laughed even. She looked at him. "You really turned them down?" "Yes," he said. "Power like theirs always costs. Too much. I like being human too much to change." She smiled small at first, then wider. "I think I like you being human too." He squeezed her hand, gentle. Despite the scars, they watched the stars rebuild together. The galaxy had changed forever. The gods had fallen low. The quiet human had stood tall, and in that moment, even eternity seemed small, compared to one stubborn life that refused to break. The story was not over yet, but for now the line held, and hope burned brighter than any divine light ever could. The swarm was gone, scattered into the black like smoke after a storm. Repair ships moved through the wreckage. Human welders in bright suits worked beside Illyrian technicians. Crystal tools met metal torches. Sparks flew in silence across the void. Illyria Prime turned slow below its surface, scarred but alive. Cities that once burned now showed small lights again. People returned from hidden shelters, faces thin but eyes hopeful. Lyrael stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, hands pressed to the cool glass. The stars looked different now, brighter somehow, cleaner. Elias came up behind her, quiet steps. She felt his presence before he spoke. He stopped beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It is over," she said, soft. "For now," he answered. "Wars like this never really end. They just wait." She turned to face him. His uniform was clean now. No blood, no tears in the fabric. Yet scars showed on his neck and hands. Pale lines that told stories she had not heard yet. She reached out, touched one scar, gentle with fingertips. "You could have died," she said. "I could have," he agreed, "but I did not." "Why not?" she asked. "Why do you never break?" He looked out at the stars for a long moment, then back at her. "Because breaking means stopping. And I promised myself long ago I would not stop, not while people needed me, not while you needed me." Lyrael felt warmth rise in her chest, something soft and strong at once. She had started this marriage as a duty, a cold bargain between dying empire and rising species. Now it felt real, deep, like roots in hard soil. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his chest, listened to the steady beat of his heart, human, strong, stubborn, alive. The divines called a final council that evening in the great hall aboard the flagship. The chamber glowed soft silver, walls hummed with old power, yet the light felt weaker now. The surviving divines gathered fewer than before, their forms smaller, dimmer. Longer, towering columns of fire. They looked almost like mortals, wrapped in faint glows. Thalor's successor led them, a being named Vera, her light pale blue, edged with gray. They stood before Elias and Lyrael, the hall empty, except for a few guards and officers. Vera spoke first, voice thin, like wind through dry leaves. "We come to offer thanks," she said. "You saved what remained of us. You broke the thing that would have ended us all." Elias nodded once, said nothing. Vera continued, "We offer you what no mortal has ever held. Full ascension. Join our number. Become as we are, eternal, unbound by flesh, free of pain, free of death. Rule beside us as equal, perhaps more. The power is yours if you take it." Silence fell heavy in the hall. Lyrael felt her breath catch. She looked at Elias, his face calm. No surprise, no greed. Just quiet thought. He looked at the divines one by one, then at her. No, he said, simple, clear. Vera pulsed brighter. You refuse eternity. You refuse godhood. Refuse chains, Elias answered. Your power comes from leaving things behind. Pain, fear, weakness, mortality. I do not want to leave those things. They make us fight. They make us care. They make us human. I like being human. I like the ache after a long day. I like the taste of food. I like the warmth of another hand. I like knowing tomorrow is not promised, so today matters more. The divines stared. Some flickered as if struck. Others dimmed further. Vera spoke again, soft, almost afraid. Then, what do you want? What I have, Elias said, a life, a partner, a people worth protecting. No thrones, no borrowed light. Just the chance to keep going, one step after another. Lyra stepped forward, took his hand, stood tall beside him. I stand with him, she said. My blood is old, but it flows red now, not light. I choose the same. Vera looked between them. Long moments passed. Then she bowed low, something no divine had done in living memory. The others followed, slow, hesitant. The lights in the hall dimmed. Respectful. We feared you, Vera whispered. We feared what a human unbound might become. Now we see you choose not to become that. And we fear even more. Why? Elias asked. Because you show us what we lost, she answered. We became perfect and forgot how to live. You stay broken and remember how to endure. We will watch you, human. We will watch and learn. Perhaps in time, we will remember too. The divines left quiet, their forms fading into the walls like mist. The hall emptied until only Lyriel and Elias remained. They stood together, hands linked, looking out through the wide window at the repairing fleet ships. From two peoples worked side by side, gray hulls beside crystal spires. Laughter drifted through open comms, human jokes mixed with Illyrian psalms. Years turned to decades. The Concord rebuilt stronger than before, not as empire, but as alliance. Worlds once ruled by mind and will, now shared by many hands. Humans brought their stubborn ways, taught others to fight with tools and grit. Illyrians shared their old wisdom, taught patience and the beauty of thought. Together they pushed back the dark, not as gods and servants, but as equals. Lyriel and Elias lived on a small world near the edge. Green hills, blue seas, simple house built of stone and steel. They grew old together. Her hair turned silver. His grew thin. Lines deepened on his face. Yet his eyes stayed sharp. His grip stayed strong. Children came first. One, then two, then more. Half Illyrian, half human. Eyes that glowed faint sometimes. Minds that reached out. Gentle strength that endured. One evening, many years later, they sat on the porch, watched the sunset red and gold over the hills. A young divine child visited, curious, small light form, no taller than a human boy. He sat at their feet, looked up with wide eyes. Grandmother, he asked, Lyriel, will the human ever become one of us? Lyriel smiled, looked at Elias, who rocked slow in his chair, eyes half closed, content. Child, she answered, I fear the day he chooses to. The child tilted his head. Why? Because on that day eternity itself would bend. Elias opened one eye, smiled small. We prefer the long way around, he said. More interesting that way. The child laughed, bright sound like bells, then faded away into light, leaving them alone with the sunset. Elias reached over, took her hand, squeezed gentle despite the years. Still here, he said. Still here, she answered. The stars came out one by one, bright, cold, distant, yet close enough to touch in memory. The galaxy spun on, quiet now. No swarms, no dying gods, only people living day by day. Human stubbornness mixed with ancient grace, a union that began in ashes, ended in hope. And somewhere in the deep black, old stories spread among spacers and scholars. tales of a princess who married a human, tales of a man so ordinary that even gods feared his power, not because he sought it, but because he never needed it. They told those stories around campfires on new worlds under strange skies. Children listened wide-eyed, learned the lesson early. Some power comes from without, borrowed and fragile. Some power comes from within, quiet, patient, unbreakable. In the end, that was enough. The porch light glowed soft behind them. Elias and Lyral sat together, watched the night settle in, peaceful, sure that whatever came next, they would meet it the same way they always had, side by side, one step after another, never stopping, never breaking, just enduring.